In the distant world of Kryndor, the peaceful city of Saralta was enjoying a sunny afternoon when the sky suddenly darkened. Massive ships descended from the clouds, their engines roaring like thunder. The people of Saralta looked up in fear as unknown invaders began landing in their city. At the front of the invasion force stood Commander Voron, a cold and calculating leader from the planet Drucker. His eyes glowed with a strange light as he ordered his troops to take over the city. The Kryndorians, peaceful and unarmed, had no way to defend themselves. The invaders easily overran the city, capturing anyone who resisted. Watching from a distance was a young Kryndorian named Lira. She was a scientist, not a soldier, but she knew she had to do something. Her mind raced as she considered the technology she had been developing in secret, an experimental energy weapon that could be a game changer if only it worked. Lira hurried back to her small lab hidden in the mountains, determined to complete her weapon before the invaders discovered her. She knew time was running out, and her people needed her now more than ever. As the invaders spread across Kryndor, capturing more cities and enslaving the people, Lira worked tirelessly in her lab. She had no military training, but her knowledge of energy science was unmatched. If she could perfect her weapon, it might be the key to turning the tide. Meanwhile, the invaders grew bolder, their leader Voron becoming more confident with each victory. He believed the Kryndorians were too weak to fight back. Little did he know, Lira was about to prove him wrong. In the dead of night, Lira finally finished her weapon, a small, handheld device that could unleash a concentrated beam of energy powerful enough to destroy even the strongest Drucker in armor. She knew it wasn't enough to win the war, but it was a start. Gathering a small group of Kryndorian resistance fighters, Lira shared her plan. They would use her weapon to strike a blow against the invaders and show them that Kryndor wasn't as weak as they thought. The resistance fighters, though scared, agreed to follow Lira. They knew this was their only chance. With her heart pounding, Lira led the resistance fighters through the dense, dark forests that surrounded the Druckeran base. The night was quiet, but the tension in the air was palpable. The Druckeran base loomed ahead, its harsh lights cutting through the darkness. Lira knew this was their best chance to strike. The base was heavily guarded, with tall walls and patrols at every corner, but they had the element of surprise on their side. As they reached the edge of the forest, Lira signaled for the group to stop. They crouched low, hidden by the thick underbrush, and watched the movements of the Druckeran soldiers. The enemy was confident, unprepared for an attack. Lira's fingers tightened around her energy weapon. She knew that the success of their mission depended on her. The weapon was untested in real combat, and this would be its first real trial. Taking a deep breath, Lira carefully aimed her weapon at the main gate of the base. Her hands were steady, but inside, her heart was racing. She had spent countless hours perfecting this weapon, and now it all came down to this moment. She pressed the trigger, and a brilliant beam of light shot out, striking the gate with pinpoint accuracy. The gate exploded in a shower of sparks and metal, leaving a gaping hole where it once stood. For a brief moment, everything was silent. The Druckeran soldiers stared in shock, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Then chaos erupted. The resistance fighters, seizing the opportunity, charged forward with all their might. They moved swiftly, using their knowledge of the terrain to outmaneuver the confused and panicking Druckerans. Lira stayed behind, providing cover with her energy weapon. The Druckerans, never having faced such a powerful and unexpected attack, struggled to organize a defense. Lira's weapon cut through their armor with ease, taking down soldier after soldier. The resistance fighters fought bravely, their spirits lifted by the sight of the invaders falling back. Commander Voron, who had been watching the battle from a safe distance, was furious. He couldn't believe that the Kryndorians, whom he had deemed weak and powerless, were now a serious threat. His plans were falling apart right in front of him, and he was determined to stop this resistance at any cost. He ordered more reinforcements to crush the uprising, but the damage had already been done. As the battle continued, Lyra's weapon proved to be the game-changer she had hoped it would be. The Dracarans were forced to retreat, unable to withstand the relentless assault from the resistance. The Kryndorians, who had been living in fear and despair, had finally struck a blow against their oppressors. The first strike had been a success, and the tide of the war had begun to turn. But Lira knew that this was just the beginning. The Dracarans would not give up easily, and there were still many challenges ahead. Yet, for the first time, Lira felt a sense of hope. She had given her people a fighting chance, and now they had to make the most of it. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. Lira and her fighters regrouped, ready to face whatever came next. As the battle raged on, Lira and her fighters continued to push the Dracarans back. But they were heavily outnumbered, and the Dracaran reinforcements were closing in fast. Lira knew they couldn't hold out much longer if they didn't come up with a new plan. Desperate to gain an advantage, Lira took a deep breath and made a risky decision. She aimed her energy weapon at the Dracaran command center, a heavily fortified structure where Commander Voron was directing the battle. If she could destroy the command center, it might disrupt the invaders' plans and cause confusion among their ranks. With steady hands, Lira adjusted her weapon's settings to maximum power. She knew this shot had to count. Taking careful aim, she fired. The energy beam shot through the air, glowing bright against the darkened sky. It hit the command center dead on, and for a moment, everything seemed to stop. Then, with a massive explosion, the command center was engulfed in flames. The blast was so powerful that it shook the ground beneath their feet. The Dracaran soldiers, who had been so confident just moments before, suddenly found themselves leaderless and in complete disarray. The Kryndorian resistance fighters, seeing their chance, charged forward with renewed energy. They took advantage of the confusion among the Dracarans, pushing them back even further. The Dracarans, who had never faced such determined resistance, began to retreat in panic. Commander Voron, who had survived the blast, but was now injured and disoriented, tried to regroup his forces. But it was too late. The Kryndorians had gained the upper hand, and Voron's troops were in full retreat. The battle that had seemed hopeless just hours before was now turning in their favor. Lira couldn't believe what she was seeing. Her risky plan had worked. The destruction of the command center had thrown the Dracarans into chaos, and now they were on the run. But Lira knew this was only a small victory. The Dracarans would regroup and come back stronger. They needed to be ready for whatever came next. As the last of the Dracaran forces retreated from the battlefield, Lira gathered her fighters. They were exhausted but victorious. For the first time since the invasion began, they had won a major battle. Lira knew they couldn't celebrate for long. They had to prepare for the next fight, but for now, they had given their people hope. Weeks passed, and the resistance grew stronger as more Kryndorians joined the fight. Lira continued to improve her weapon, creating new versions that were even more powerful. The Dracarans, now aware of the threat, began to hunt her down, determined to end the resistance. The final battle took place in the heart of Kryndor, in the ruins of Saralta, where it had all begun. Lira and her fighters faced off against Commander Voron and his elite troops. The city was a war zone, with explosions lighting up the sky and the sound of battle echoing through the streets. Lira fought with all her might, using her weapon to take down Dracaran soldiers one by one. But Voron was a formidable opponent, and he wasn't going to give up easily. The two faced each other in a final showdown, each knowing that only one would walk away. In the end, It was Lyra's determination and ingenuity that won the day. She managed to outsmart Voron, using her weapon to trap him and his remaining forces in a collapsing building. As the dust settled, the Dracaran threat was finally over. The Kryndorians had won their freedom, and Lira was hailed as a hero. But she knew the true victory belonged to everyone who had fought and sacrificed for their world. Kryndor was safe, for now, but Lira would never stop fighting to protect her people. And so, the story of Lira and the Kryndorian resistance became a legend, a tale of courage, ingenuity, and the unbreakable spirit of a people who refused to be conquered.